You're listening to a special WABC broadcast, Urban America, the Next Century, a WABC Talk Radio Town Hall meeting. This hour, the topic is family values. Is this any place to raise a kid? Here's your host for this special broadcast, Bob Grant.
And let's be heard. Good afternoon, everyone. The telephone lines are open, even though we are broadcasting in this most unusual setting. And I have, I guess we would call them panelists. Actually, they're people like you and me. But we have invited them to join us to try to discuss something that maybe will shed some light on what family values have come to represent in this year 1992. Now, if you notice, the introduction to the broadcast talks about, is this any place to raise a kid in the coming century? We still have 8 years left of this century, and the way we're going, I don't even know if we're going to make it to the next century. Are you optimistic? Do you think we will? I'm looking out, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you in the radio audience, I'm looking out at a lot of mannequins. I thought for a minute there were people here, but they're looking... are there people here? Yeah. It looks as though they're all auditioning for a Shiva session somewhere. Let's not be so glum about all this. All right, let me introduce some of the people who are really the heart of the program. And by the way, I am going to function as a moderator. That means I will restrict my own opinions as much as possible. That'll be the day. That'll be the day. All right, let's introduce our panelists. And for the edification of those of you in the radio audience, it just works out that we have three ladies sitting to my left. We have three distinguished gentlemen sitting to my right. First of all, let's introduce the panel. Chris Ann Moore of the Women's Action Coalition. All right, you want applause? That's okay. We have to my immediate left, New York City Councilwoman representing the 6th Congressional District. That's the Upper West Side or Middle West Side of Manhattan. And I'm talking about Ronnie Eldridge. We also have on my left, we have Ellen Carton, Executive Director of the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. Ellen Carton. Now, on my right, I want to introduce, on my immediate right, the gentleman who, when he was speaking to me from a phone booth on, I believe, Myrtle Avenue last spring, was mugged while he was in the process of speaking to me. He is one of my favorite rabbis. I can't say my favorite rabbi because then the other 10,000 rabbis will get mad at me. Shia Hecht. Of the Seaview Jewish Temple and also chairman of the board of the National Committee for the Furtherance of Jewish Education. On his right, president of the Family Defense Council, a man who really needs no introduction to any audience in the tri-state area, indefatigable in his struggle to maintain some sanity in this insane world, Dr. Howard Hurwitz. And the president of Morality in Media, which almost sounds like a contradiction in terms. Morality in Media? He is Bob Peters. We welcome you, Mr. Peters.
Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, some of the questions that have been proposed, and these questions have been proposed because of the amount of times they seem to pop up in New York, certainly. Condom distribution in schools with parental notification and consent, or should parents not even be involved? Who would like to address that question first off? All right, we go to Chris Ann Moore of the Women's Action Coalition.
The facts are that 1 in 10 teenagers between the ages of 15 and 19 become pregnant every year. Over 40,000 girls drop out of high school every year because of pregnancy. Not only looking at that, but let's look at HIV. By the year 2000, it is estimated that worldwide over 40 million people will have AIDS. The rate of teenage AIDS has increased 40% between 1988 and 1990. We need to educate our children so they can make educated choices. And we need to give them the tools to protect themselves if they choose to have sex.
All right, that's Chris Anmore, the Women's Coalition. And I take it that Ellen Carton, you wanted to say something?
I'd like to add that I think in these times that we shouldn't be talking about a matter of one person's morality versus another, but we're talking about a matter of life and death. It's urgent that condoms be distributed in schools and be available freely.
All right, we might as well have everybody on that side go to bat because we'll have the other side in just a second. Ronnie Eldridge.
Not only do we have 44,000 young girls dropping out of school, but teens who are bearing children are getting younger and younger, so that we are finding now 13 and 14-year-old girls are girls who are having babies, and that we are closing our eyes and wishing we were someplace else when we ignore the realities of how these kids are living. And that, plus when a young girl drops out of school and has a baby, the statistics show that she's more likely to have a second child and maybe even a third child and not return to school. What we, of course, want are children to finish school and to be educated and be able to have a job and to work. It is unproductive and it is totally destructive for us to ignore the realities of today's world.
Would it be fair to summarize all three of you as saying you are for the distribution of condoms without parental consent? All three of you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Here for WAC.
All right. All three of those persons who have just spoken have that very definite viewpoint. Rabbi Hecht, I take it you don't agree?
Well, quite correct. The first thing, I'm just wondering, you do these surveys and you have these numbers. I'll give you many communities, you won't find any dropouts, any teenage pregnancies, and it seems to me that if we will give our children some family values, and we're doing it. I'm doing it with my children, and my neighbors are doing it with their children. I think many of the problems that you'll be talking about, and of course, yes, it's very, very nice when we talk on an emotional level, we're talking about a question of life or death. But there's also a very important thing, and that, unfortunately, we do not find that they're teaching it at all in schools, and that's morality to begin with. And if you're saying that we shouldn't judge a person, it's not a question about judging anybody or anything. It's simply a situation that we have an obligation as parents. You know, it's very interesting that we're sitting down and the three, according to nature, the three women sat down on one side and seemed to be fighting one thing, and the three men are sitting on the other side, and the way it came out, family values, I think the women
This is an orthodox setting. We separate the women and the men.
We were seated this way. We didn't sit this way voluntarily.
No.
Although we're delighted to be together.
No, it's just seemed to me.
Because we know we're stronger together.
It would seem, no question about it. It would seem to me that mothers and women should be fighting for family, fighting for their children.
We are fighting for families, and we'll come back and discuss that, I think, in answer to some of the other questions, if we want to talk about the opportunities and child support
when
from
you spoke,
men who desert the women.
with respect.
Well, we want to discuss the question.
Let's move to...
I thought we were going to have some open discussion.
You are, but we're just setting the stage here,
But they're so
Councilwoman.
well-mannered,
All
I
right,
know.
Howard Hurwitz, I take it you would like to put your oar in. Go ahead, please.
I'd like to confide in this audience. Some of my best friends are women. I am married to one for 51 years. She's listening now, and I'll have to account to her when I get home as to whether we have acquitted the family side creditably. Now, what is realistic, as these women would have us believe, about 1.4 million pregnancies of teenagers in the United States? We have had sex education programs in the schools, and I speak as a man with 40 years of experience as a high school principal and teacher. We've been teaching sex education for 20 years, and now in the last 2 years in many cities in the country, we are actually giving children in school condoms. This is absolutely fantastic. And let me tell you, and just very briefly, how they are being given the condoms. In addition to the condoms these children are being given to encourage their promiscuity and the further spread of AIDS, not its interdiction, we have the Teenage Bill of Rights, which Chancellor Fernandez has given out. And here is what it says to the kids, and they have it in their hands. Condoms can be sexy. They come in different colors, sizes, flavors, and styles to be more fun for you and your partner. You can put them on together. Shop around till you find the type you like best. Be creative and be safe. This is an abomination.
All right. Before we take our first break, let's hear from Bob Peters, who is the president of Morality in Media. Bob?
Well, I found it interesting that the beginning speaker, Chris Ann Moore, mentioned that there were a growing number of teenage pregnancies. My memory serves me correct that prior to the AIDS epidemic, it had been pretty much concluded that condoms weren't very effective in curbing pregnancies. But now that we have an AIDS epidemic and the pill and those sort of things don't protect against AIDS, we're back to the old condoms, which nobody really liked to use very much in the first place, that leak, that break, that are only effective if you use them every time. But the second point I would make, since it's somewhat of a general discussion, is that I've often heard groups like Planned Parenthood admit that part of the problem with teen promiscuity is a media that's constantly promoting immorality, that's glorifying loose sex and things like that. They will admit it. They will say this is part of the problem. But you will never hear these groups take any effort to get the media to clean up its act. The answer is always more birth control and these days more condoms.
All right, we have set the stage, and I'm sure that we've only begun to, as John Paul Jones, the founder of the American Navy, would have said, begun to fight. We have people who are going to be asking questions. They've lined up at the microphone already. Those of you who are in the audience, if you're not too far away, it's a gorgeous day. Why don't you come on down to the Florence Gould Theater, 55 East 59th Street, between Madison and Park. It's a very lovely theater, and there's a group of spirited citizens that you can join and be part of our experiment in town hall broadcasting. Right now, though, we take this time out on the part of WABC, commencing at 5:30 this morning, and we will conclude, I believe, at 7 p.m. But right now, we have been joined by Diane Welch, president of New York City offices of the National Organization for Women. And since you've just come in, Diane Welch, I know that we've talked on the air a couple of times when I called you on the telephone. Your views on condom distribution in schools, that was one of the first questions we had been dealing with. Would you could comment one way or the other on it?
I think the short version is I'm very much in favor of it. I'm the parent of an 11-year-old son, and I want him to be protected, and I want him to have full options, and I want him to feel like he's in charge of his own life, even though I'm still watching over it.
Does that communication between you and your son extend, heaven forbid, to you telling him it really isn't right to do it? Or have we gone beyond that? Have we become so sophisticated now in 1992 that, heaven forbid, we should never suggest chastity, we should never suggest abstinence? Good heavens.
Well, Bob, I don't think that anywhere at any time in history has anyone ever told an 11-year-old that it's all right to do it. I don't know that we have that control. I don't think my parents had that control over me. I don't think my parents, who were teenage parents, had that control either, even though their parents did tell them not to do it.
If we give our children proper values, they will choose the right things.
I absolutely agree.
I don't have to control my child or even get to speaking about many of these things that we're talking about here. And because you give them the proper values to begin with, that they are able to deal with life and all the difficulties of life and all the urges that they're going to come in contact with in a proper way.
Right, and you give them all the tools they need to deal with the situations that occur in their lives.
All right, I didn't want to spend too much time on this one particular issue, but Ronnie Eldridge...
Well, it's not this issue. I mean, I'll skip to another issue, but Rabbi Heck brings it up by saying that you have to give your children the proper sense of morality and ability to do that. And I don't want to be presumptuous, but I know that you come from a religious community with a strong sense of religion and ethics and morality. Not everybody does, and not everybody's as fortunate to have a cohesive family. We have more now. That's something that we have to talk about at another time, but obviously poverty and the things that engenders, plus other things that happen in our culture, and we've got it at all different levels. This is a very complicated question, and I think that we make it very simplistic when we simply say that a family should have a sense of morality. Well, let's look at some of the families we're talking about.
Poverty does not contribute to throwing values out the window.
Some of it does not. That's certainly true. And that's not indicating that everybody poor has no values.
Correct. Part of, just as a quick response, though, part of the question is still is morality and strong families the real answer to the problem of teen pregnancies and AIDS, or are condoms and safer sex? Now, I think it's safe to say that the three of us would agree that strong families and morality really are society's answer to the kinds of problems we're talking about, not safer sex, because safer sex has never worked. That's why we have epidemics of venereal diseases and a lot of teen pregnancies and things like that.
Statistics went down, and AIDS is now up. We'll have 30,000 children who are going to lose one or two parents to AIDS in the next 3 years. If you continue the figures that come out of, that we see, that is something that's tragic and terribly frightening, and so that's a reality.
And very painful.
If we want to talk about condoms, or we want to go back and talk about family values and morality, it'd be more interesting. I would like to just ask you, and I don't want to take your place, Bob, but what do we mean by family values? I mean, that's something we should discuss before we start on these questions.
Let's make the connection between AIDS and condoms. I read to you a moment ago from the Teenage Bill of Rights, and I read just one selection. The rest of it is equally obnoxious. But who fashioned that Teenage Bill of Rights? 300,000 copies in the 124 public high schools in the city of New York. It was fashioned by the gays in New York City. They have claimed credit for it in their homosexual publications. I have read this. And why do the homosexuals act in this way? They are hoping to gain control of the school curriculum. They are believing, or what have you believe, that condoms are the way to go for kids. But what they are doing is encouraging immorality. And yes, abstention should be the only counsel offered children in a school, not condoms, not be safe and do it.
First of all, I think we have to make it very clear here that the gays in this community have encouraged that condoms be made available because they are highly aware of the devastation of this disease. They want to keep our children safe. Now, for Mr. Hurwitz to say that there is a correlation between use of condoms and transmission of AIDS is downright false.
It's dangerous.
We use condoms in order to prevent transmission of AIDS. We want to make them available to our children so they will be prevented from getting this disease.
I believe for 2 hours they discussed the whole thing about the should we give out condoms in the previous program. I think we should try to zero in a little bit on the family values, and is this any place to raise kids in today's society?
I absolutely
agree. And I am for one
you.
who says, yes, you can raise children that can be very, very healthy with proper attitudes in this world. The first thing is you have to create the proper environment in your home. There is no reason to have a television in your home to begin with. And you look at me and you say, I'm crazy. Yeah. But let me tell you something. It is a very, very healthy attitude within our home. And many of the things that, as Bob Grant mentioned before, the whole question of morality and media. But today, any of the shows, what we call the family shows, are always very highly sexual, very suggestive, and I think, in my opinion, as a parent, not putting aside that I'm a rabbi, as a parent, I think is very detrimental to our children.
Now, he said no television in his home. He didn't say no radio. You do have a radio, don't you? All right.
One further point on condoms. It is very vital.
Now, I tell you what we're going to do right here. We're going to take a call, not a call, but a man in person here. I like being the moderator because it's being a dictator, really, and I was born to be a dictator. I want you to know that. We have a gentleman here, Bill Sussman. You've been standing patiently at the microphone. Did you have a question or a comment you wanted to pose to the panel?
Yes, Bob. I happen to be the father of the victims who had been raped back a year ago in the Inwood section of Manhattan. There were 3 girls. We went out for our 19th wedding anniversary. We spoke. You were one of the first ones that I had called in. You were very good to me. You gave me approximately all the time I needed at that given point. What we're dealing with right now is the conviction, or the rapist who had come into my household. It wasn't rape originally. It was to push in and to get goods. In other words, push in robbery, armed robbery. He was tried for armed robbery. He received the maximum on armed robbery. But through the court system, the way the court system works, that rape becomes a secondary issue. And regardless as how many other cases that he had hit, there were like 7 or 8 other families that were involved here, he's only going to get up to 25 to 50 years in prison. In other words, the minimum of 25 years. Now, what am I dealing with? I'm dealing with, as we know, the worldwide crisis of AIDS, HIV. There is no law on our books that read right now that where the conviction of a said criminal or his conviction or convicted by a jury, that he must go through HIV testing. It's his option and not ours. And I think we should try to get this on our book in New York State.
All right, we're going to take a time out, and then we're going to continue right here on WABC. All right, we have already consumed 35 minutes, and I'm often curious about settings like this, whether anybody really learns anything, and this is no reflection on the immediate panel that we have, but I often wonder whether anybody really learns anything. Hopefully, at the conclusion of today's broadcast festivities, our listeners will say they learned something. But I know this about people who enter debates. Nobody's going to change. See these ladies on my left, those of you in the studio audience, nobody's going to change their minds. Nobody in a million years. Because these are, this is a new type of female. Isn't it curious? No, really, I have to say, isn't it curious? In the good old days, women were the protectors of a family's morality. They seemed to carry the moral code book. Not anymore. Now they're all saying anything goes, but just make sure
we have
you're
not said that. We are completely at whack for families' values and for morality and for transmission of those values. But we believe those values should be respect, celebration of diversity, understanding of difference, simple human values of caring about your neighbor, seeking to understand your neighbor. There is a passage in the Bible which says, seek not to remove the splinter from your brother's eye before you remove the mote from your own.
Let's listen to this
We at
gentleman right
WAC
here
are
stepping to the microphone. Yes, sir.
witnesses to people attempting with fists and guns and knives to remove the splinter from their brother's eye.
Sir?
Bob Anthony from Bensonhurst, wall-to-wall Bob Grand Country. I just want to say, how can we have family values if there's no family?
I think it's time to realize that families come in all shapes and sizes. And if we're looking to define a family, what are family values? To me, the most important values that families have and what can define a family are people who live together and share in the sharing and caring, committed relationship. Those are family values.
Well, I don't see that. I see them sharing crack stems. That's what they share. Where's daddy of these broads that are giving birth? Where's daddy? You got 28-year-old grandmothers raising the kids. It sounds great, sharing. I don't see that.
I think a lot of daddies are avoiding their child support payments.
That's family values, exactly.
Daddy for a
Where's
long
daddy?
time.
Where are men and their sense of responsibility to families? Mr.
Really,
Grant.
the good old men in the good old days probably weren't avoiding their child support payments.
We're home and taking care of families.
That
Mr. Grant.
the expression,
Excuse me,
family
Mr.
comes in
Hurwitz,
all
I'm
shapes
talking.
and sizes, comes from the first grade syllabus, where children today in the New York City elementary schools are being taught that homosexual couples are family.
And
we are all for respecting homosexuals having their right to behave the way they wish privately.
Good.
But we should not be teaching in our schools that homosexual couples are family. This is violative of any fundamental traditional family value.
All right, Dr.
Mr.
Hurwitz,
Hurwitz, you're living in another world.
Ronnie
I'd like to
Eldridge,
tell you, Mr. Grant, I object to the way you characterized us. We are women who believe in family. I had a traditional family of 3 children. I was widowed when I was 39 years old with 3 young children. And I learned firsthand how I could not be dependent on a man to support me because he died. And I had to go out and support 3 children. I have since remarried. I now have 3 children, 6 stepchildren, 3 daughter-in-laws, 3 daughter-in-laws, 3 son-in-laws, 5 grandchildren, and an 89-year-old mother. I know traditional family values, but I know that they are out of place today, that women cannot afford to stay home, whether they have a husband there or not, that most women are out working to support children. Well, that's the implication, that we don't care and do the traditional nurturing of children. We nurture our children We try to nurture our
talking about
neighbors,
your
as has been
cavalier
said.
attitude about
We know
condom
that we have to
distribution.
live in a peaceful world, and we know that with the hatred and the discrimination
All right, Jay, get a
and the
politician
anger
on the
that
panel
goes
and see
on
what
in this
happens.
world, that we
Miss
will
Eldridge-
never be able to have
Ms. Eldridge,
a future where
you
we want
mentioned
our
something
children to
about
live.
living in a different world. I think if you or I traveled to China or India or the Mideast or to Africa or to South America, we would not find the kinds of families that Miss Carton wanted to redefine and actually invent. I say
You won't find it in Crown Heights or Williamsburg and Borough Park and many other neighborhoods.
question-
men
wait,
are
wait,
so
wait,
threatened by this
I
concept
listened
of
to you.
diversity. I think
listened
it
to
is.
you.
It's really
Well, you
interesting
said,
that you're so
you know, I
threatened
think
by it all.
that it's true that there isn't an awful lot of place for it in places like Greenwich Village in terms of traditional families.
For
but
what,
but I
sir?
think that if you would go around the world, you'd find that the family means a man and a woman in a marriage relationship, the children they
That's
bear,
what you-
the grandparents,
Less than
the brothers, the sisters, the
20%
uncles.
of families in America include a man, a woman, and two children.
There is
Get
one
with
country in
reality.
the world right now which is a morally very sick one, which allows gay marriages, and it's the first one that's ever done it. Now, I would admit there are some who want to come up with a new set of morality. I think one of the speakers said that. And of course, there are people who want to redefine the family to include just about any kind of a group of people that live under the same roof. But if you go around the world
Do you
in which
defi-
we live today, you will not find that so-called family except in the Western democracies and in the areas
Please.
where you have
If you go
family
around
decay.
this country, you will find that less than 20% of the families in this country
And what's happening to
May
our
I ask
country?
you-
We're
Conform to
going
your
the dog.
model of the
What's happening to our
family.
country?
We're talking
Productivity is going
reality
down.
here.
The economy is going down. Many of these things start within the family.
Many of
If
these
you
things
have a
start with
strong family and
economic
a healthy
programs
family,
which
you
cut child
cannot
care,
be,
women's
you
health
cannot
care,
do your job
maternal
right.
care.
Would not have to-
If you're going through a divorce, you're not going to be a good teacher, and you're not going to be a good radio host. You're not going to be a good rabbi. You're not going to be able to do your job right unless the family is a unit where it gives you support. And if you're going through any difficulty, and it doesn't make a difference.
All right.
if you
We
talk about-
agree,
Please,
Rabbi.
let's,
we
let's
need
take
that
a
support in
question.
the family.
Let's take a-
Absolutely.
Let's take a question from another member of our studio audience. Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Grant, ladies and gentlemen of the panel. My name is Hindi Lewis, and I am a mother of 6 children, ranging in age from 14 years, a girl, to a 2-year-old boy. I'm also the program coordinator for an organization which serves to promote family life, family morals, family values within the Jewish community. And what I would like to say is that there is definitely a decline in this country of family values and family morals. What we have to do is return to the old ways. One of the old ways would be to have respect when people are speaking, to listen to them. And to respect basic monogamous marriages, families, children, and to teach our children the right way to go. And the only way we can do that is by being good, solid, standard parents with good morals and encouraging this kind of behavior in the home. And the schools have a responsibility to encourage the correct morals also. And distribution of condoms and the promotion of alternative lifestyles is not the way to go. I would like to, if I might make one other comment.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to pose this question. I introduced Mr. Peters as president of Morality in Media. I just wonder about that word morality. What the definitions, without any long speeches, what the definitions of our panelists would be regarding morality. I just pose this question: is it possible to have a different lifestyle and still possess morality?
Excuse me, different
why don't
from
we
whom?
start with Diane Welch over at that end?
I think the key word here is morality, Bob. When you're teaching your children morality, and I certainly think that I've taught my child morality as a feminist mother, married for 17 years to my high school sweetheart, you're talking about issues, you're talking about concepts, you're talking about ways of being. It doesn't matter whose mouth it comes from. That's why teachers can teach our children so effectively. What matters is that we teach them honesty, care, loving. Those are morals. There's no new morality. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're talking about the same exact issues that parents have always wanted to convey to their children. It doesn't matter who the parents are. What matters are the values that are conveyed to our children, that we teach them to grow up to tithe to society, to take care and love their neighbors even when they're assholes.
All right.
All of those things. They're all Christian virtues.
I asked for a definition, your definition.
Moral virtue.
Try to keep it as concise as possible. Let's go to Rabbi Hecht and get his definition.
The first thing is we respect our children. I think the language we use is extremely important. Talking about morality, we do have a little bit of a difficulty if we do not bring God into it. But yes, once we have a set of values, it is extremely important that we do not only teach and preach to our children, but actually be a living example. I want to point out something extremely important from the Torah perspective. And my children, both my students and my children in my home, know very, very much. I live in a community that's extremely diversified in color and race, etc., etc. I teach my children that every single human being, as it says in Ethics of Our Fathers, is a creation of God. And as a creation of God, we have to respect that person. And therefore, no matter what lifestyle you pick, I'm not going to throw you out of my community. I may feel that it's my obligation to influence whatever I can for you to change your ways. If I think stealing is wrong, I'm going to ask you to stop stealing. If you're living in a particular sexual orientation, I'm going to try to do what's in my power, again, with the undercurrent of love and compassion for you, as well as I'm talking, of course, to the person that we're dealing with. But morality, unfortunately, we have to bring in a little bit of a higher power, because if we decide what morality is here, out there in Tucson, Arizona, they'll make another, and somewhere in India, if every community, but putting God aside for a moment, if we follow the founding fathers of this country and the morality level that they have set for us within the Constitution. Yes, we're not talking about breaking in.
All right, I'm going to have to interrupt. Isn't it interesting? I've asked two people so far to respond. They can't give a short answer to the question. I wonder why. We'll try to find out in just a moment. Our producer, we don't have to have applause each time, but if you feel like it, that's okay with me. All right, now, we had two definitions, I believe, of morality. Let's have a third definition from Councilwoman Ronnie Eldridge.
I think it's, with my children and myself, it's a respect for creatures of the world and for the world around us. It is a hope that we can feel proud of ourselves and exist with a sense of honor, that we have an ethical sense of right and wrong, and that we have a tolerance of diversity, and we are not judgmental of other people, as long as other people's actions don't interfere with our own life or with an order in the world. And it is a basic sense and search for a justice and equality and an ability for fulfillment of one's life and for success of whatever your achievements or hopes, that you have some goals, and peace. And that means peace in your home, peace on your block, in your community, peace in the world.
All right, let's go to Dr. Howard Hurwitz, and your definition, Dr. Hurwitz.
Morality is the difference between right and wrong. And I will tell you this. In my 40 years as a teacher, a principal, college professor, I never met a kid, a teacher, a parent, a fellow professor who didn't know right from wrong. But what's happening now with the kind of distortion you are getting from people who would have us recognize homosexual couples as married is something that might destroy that simple definition of being able to distinguish between right and wrong.
Thank you, Dr. Hurwitz. Let's have a definition now from another member of the panel. This time it is Ellen Carton, Executive Director, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation.
Well, I'd have to basically agree with my colleague Ronnie Eldridge, and I would also agree that it is the difference between knowing right and wrong. And I think that one of the ways that we know that something is right is tolerance and respect for people who are not only like us, but also for people who aren't like us. And it seems to me that in this world where there's so little love, so much increased violence against different communities, that it seems to me that we would not only tolerate but accept gays and lesbians because we are people who are loving other people. And it's a little bit different from you, Mr. Horowitz, but it's not wrong. I grew up in a traditional Jewish household. I was brought up to believe in respect and tolerance for people, and I am a lesbian who is a very moral, truthful, ethical being. And I absolutely oppose your belief that people who are lesbians and gays are not moral. I think it's really not for you to say.
We didn't say that. We tolerate by all means the individual homosexual. You can do what you want privately. We object to your entering the schools and the legislatures to get people to accept homosexuality as a viable alternative to heterosexuality. That's what we object to, your political agenda.
All right, let's get another definition because this hour is rapidly drawing to a close. Let's get another definition, this time from Chris Ann Moore of the Women's Action Coalition.
I would once again have to say that morality is knowing right from wrong. And I would hope that anyone would know that it is wrong to judge, to be violent against, to teach our children not to understand, to teach our children not to be tolerant. There is enough violence in our lives, in our streets, in our nation, among our nations. And if we hope to stop that, the only way to do it is to promote understanding of different lifestyles, of multicultural, multi-ethnic diversity. And I think that is the strength in our nation. And I think my definition of morality is quite simply knowing right from wrong.
All right, now we have Bob Peters, president of Morality and Media, and of course, I saved you for last purposely.
Thank you. Well, if you look in the dictionary, morality has a very broad meaning, which can apply to, racial discrimination or an unjust war or almost anything. It's just a broad term that gets into the area of what is right and wrong. But if you also look in the dictionary, you find a narrower definition of morality, which specifically deals with what is right and wrong in regard to human sexuality. Now, traditional morality would say that the appropriate place for human sexuality is within a heterosexual, for the most part, monogamous marriage. Sex outside of marriage is not right. That's traditional morality. Now, obviously, many people don't agree with traditional morality. I would say that one or more of the speakers on the other side of this platform would pretty much take the view that as long as you don't exploit somebody or, force sex in a non-consenting way, just about sex with anybody at any time, in any fashion, is appropriate. I would add just one more thing. I will stop.
All right.
Is that this version of morality that says that anything goes pretty much is the version of morality that is promoted in the media, in our Hollywood film industry, and in the music industry.
All right. I take it we did have someone who wanted to respond to something that Mr. Peters said. Was that you? Who was it?
I said that he should express his own views and not express ours. We're going to discuss adultery. That's a whole other question. Right?
All right. Let's take another question from one of the members of our studio audience. Yes, sir.
I'd like to thank WABC for having this open house forum where people can voice their minds. I'm a custodian in the school system, and as Dr. Hurwitz mentioned, it's going down the tubes in a hurry. They can spend $230,000 for condoms, and even have some mint-flavored condoms if you'll take that.
That's correct.
And I found that out at a public meeting of the Board of Education. They can spend $230,000 for condoms, but they can't spend $1 to have it inspect the fuel oil that's burned in the city of New York. There is no inspection on the fuel oil in the city of New York, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. You received a package, or you should receive a package, because I handed it to one of the security guards, and you should go through it. And what is morality? Morality is right and wrong as taught by our parents. My mother had 6 children. My wife's mother had 7 children. Where did these women who belong to the NOW organization, who do they represent? I figure women who would protect my mother's rights and will protect my wife, mother's rights in this world are the women's organizations that I can support. But in no way and no how can I support an organization that does not take care of the poor and uneducated women. These women here are well educated and they can make a living any place. My mother, my wife's mother, all they can do was to take care of the family. God bless morality and God bless the decent people of this world. Thank you.
Well,
We certainly would.
You see what happens when you're having fun? The time goes by so quickly. We have already consumed 1 hour of the Bob Grant program today. I think I'll do this all the time, make it nice and easy on myself. And we'll get together every day, Monday through Friday, from 3 until 7, right here. All of you must show up at the same time. We're going to pause for news, and then we will continue on WABC. Wherever we are, we're at Guildhall right here. And ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Howard Hurwitz, who has made such a contribution to our program today, has left. The chair he occupied is now occupied by a person. I want to tell you something. I came to New York, did my first broadcast September 21st, 1970. And I was on a radio station other than WABC. It was WMCA. And I'll tell you who was on 1 hour ahead of me. The hour ahead of me was occupied by the lady who now sits in Dr. Hurwitz's former chair. Let's welcome Dr. Joyce Brothers. While the news was being presented, this very lovely young lady came up to me and said, "Could I ask a question?" And I said, "Yes, you can," and invited her to come up to the stage. "What is the question you have?" And by the way, how old are you?
11.
All right. Could have fooled me. Could have fooled me. I was about to ask her out, but whoa, this is jailbait. Whoa. Anyway, what is your question? And what is your first name?
Amber.
Okay, Amber. What's the question?
Well, it's not really a question. I just wanted to say the El Supremo salute.
What?
El Supremo salute.
Oh, you want to give a message to El Supremo? Okay, go ahead.
Mario, escéndame. Tu sais proprio nos facim.
Very good. Very good. What's your last name?
Decker.
Okay, thank you. That's a message to his arrogance in Albany. And no program is complete without... You see, that's known in... if you were Jewish, you would call that a machaya. That's a machaya. It makes you feel better to call him a sfachim. Anyway, let's get back to what we're doing here today. Some of these people are looking at me like, this guy's a wacko. You're right, I am. That's why I do the show. Okay. Joyce Brothers, we've been talking about family values.
But, Bob, I must say, you know, we've spent many years on the same broadcast, and you're not a wacko. I did a good job with you.
Well, thank you. We've been talking about family values. Do you have a definition of family values and a definition of morality?
First of all, let's talk about what a family is. A family consists of people who love one another. Where there is love, there is family. Now, that family can be any variation. And one of the reasons why the family has survived for generations, for over 5,000 years, is because it is malleable, because it is capable of adjusting to the world. But there has never been a culture that wasn't a dead-end culture that didn't have some form of family. Regularization of sex between people, and an arrangement to bring up helpless infants to the point where they were no longer helpless. Now, that child can be brought up by any number of different people. But unless that child is taught control, unless that child is taught self-control, what we have is some of the chaos we have in our world today. We have not just violent crime, but crime getting more violent, crime being done by children who are younger and younger. There are families now, no matter what you call a family, if a family has love and teaches a child self-control, then you have hope for the future. When the child doesn't learn this, all children want, I want what I want when I want it. And if I have to take a rock and hit somebody in the head, I will do so. And you have to teach a child to respect others, to care about others, to put yourself in other people's shoes. And any family that has Values will teach that. And if it doesn't teach that, then it has no right to be called a family.
That's Dr. Joyce Brothers, as only she can put things. By the way, before we go one step further, I'd like to invite anybody listening in. If they'd like to join us, we have some seats available. Please come on down. We are located at 55 East 59th Street between Park and Madison, the Florence Gould Hall. It's a lovely auditorium, a very Hamish atmosphere. It's a nice, relaxed atmosphere. I invite you to join us. Now, Dr. Brothers said something very interesting. She said that you don't find this I want what I want when I want it, and the children getting it, in a well-regulated home. I see a lady sitting in the second row here who was in my group that I took to the Orient. I went through China, Japan, Bangkok, Thailand, Singapore, Hong Kong. And we noticed something about the children there. They don't whine, they don't cry, they don't pout. We were told to give out lollipops. We were in Beijing, the capital of China. And there were youngsters. We tried to give them lollipops. The youngster would not take it. The youngster would look at his or her mother or father, and if the mother or father nodded yes, they took it. Usually the mother or father nodded no, and they didn't take it. No whining, no Chinese equivalent of, but I want it. So what is wrong with the American mother and father, the American family, that we have so many whiners?
They looked at a parent to find out if it's kosher.
All right. We're going to take a brief time out.